Hi everybody. The study that I chose to look at for this week was interested in extended cognition and the relationship between extended cognition and cognitive capacity, cognitive functioning. So, the extended mind, do smartphones interfere with cognitive ability, or do they help us extend our minds and are of practical value to us in all cases? So some vocabulary for this study that we should define. Cognitive style means the ability to think analytically and creatively. Cognitive ability means the computational aspect of cognition. And extended cognition means any kind of device that helps you think about something or remember something. So a computer can be a piece of extended cognition. A notebook, by definition, could be a piece of extended cognition. But for this study, we're looking at smartphones specifically. So 3 studies were done on smartphones and cognition in this manner. We're talking about cognitive style, cognitive ability, and boredom proneness. Boredom proneness means, well, just as it sounds, our tendency to be bored. And for the 3rd study, that was measured by a survey that was done by each person in a non-clinical environment. So study 1, cognitive style. As we can see for this study, 196 adult participants, the mean age of 35, were chosen to complete questions online, and ANOVA measurements were used to measure the differences of cognitive style and cognitive ability. Study 2, 208 adults were chosen by similar manners. This study was writing the coattails of a larger set of studies that were measuring ideology and political leanings. So cognitive reflection and numeracy tests were used here. Cognitive reflection are word tests that say, for example, if a ball and a bat are $1.10 and the bat is worth $1, how much is the ball worth? So when we look at a question like this, we're talking about something called dual processing theory. So the first aspect of dual processing theory is something that is very simple to work out in terms of information processing. So the cognitive load, we can say, is quite low. When the cognitive load becomes higher and it requires more effort to cogitate on the answer, to reflect on the steps of a question and a word question, this becomes much harder. So the authors of this study think that over-reliance on simple shortcuts, for example, search engines, can create this kind of miserliness in individuals. It can create a habit that resists the more difficult part of dual processing theory and renders us poorer information processors in the process. Word sum vocabulary tests were also used. So as we can see, this is the numbers at the bottom mean the time it took to answer a question correctly. So people who have much lower smartphone use in their life, as we can see with the 25 here, took less time to answer than higher smartphone use. So this would suggest that using smartphones all the time to look up these quick answers via Google search, etc., are actually detrimental to our ability to function as cognitive machines. So the researchers thought that boredom proneness might be a factor, a mediating factor. Let's see if it was. So the question is, does smartphone use and boredom affect reasoning performance? And the answer is actually no. Findings did not suggest that. There was no correlation between the people who said that they were prone to boredom and worse results on the aforementioned tests. However, the heuristic and biases tests did show a correlation between those two things, did show a positive correlation. So that's something to think about for further studies maybe. A moderator. So the collection of data, because they were self-reported surveys and the online tests did not happen in a clinical environment, they happened at home, these two things could be moderators. And do they question the validity and accuracy of the study? Maybe future studies could have a clinical environment to test these hypotheses out. So some thoughts on my part. Joe Krause talks about not being able to engage in long-form thinking. He says that in order to think creatively, we need downtime or moments of free thinking away from stimulus that breeds creativity. So this study would seem to suggest that creative thinking can be attributed to high cognitive style and high cognitive ability, so two different kinds of vocabulary to think about Joe Krause's point. Um, Barbara Oakley also says that in order to be a creative thinker, we have to focus on the process. So one of the examples that she gives is inventors oscillating between a state of focused, refined thinking, thinking with expectation, and non-focused, sort of passive, almost dreamlike states of contemplation, where we are able to think of things at a different angle. And if we're always trying to get the answer from a search engine, then that pretty much obliterates those two ways of thinking that Oakley and Krause are proponents of. So one of the readings that we had to do for last week was about slow technology. I read the coinage of that term was from a 2001 paper that was basically a philosophical text. And it was talking about how we need to think about technology in different terms. Since technology used to be something that was basically, information technology that is, basically planted in the office environment and did not have much use outside of the office environment or scientific environment, and now is taking the world over by personal devices. The design of technology and its uses needs to be rethought. So we can see a quote here. He says, much development has been concentrated on the computer as a tool to be used in specific situations to accomplish a certain task. So now if we use that same definition from a personal device perspective, is it healthy, or is it something that we need to rethink? So he gives the example of the doorbell, for example. The doorbell is something that we ring in order to get a response, but the aesthetic that's contained in the ringing of the doorbell is self-referential. To ring the doorbell is also to listen to the tone of the doorbell. So you have this this binary between an effective relationship between the user and the tool, and a relationship that's based on pleasure, based on aesthetics, that prolongs the time that we take to interact with this tool. So if we can stop thinking about smartphones in terms of just plugging in information to get information, and start thinking of them with more of a slow technology kind of perspective, then maybe that's a practical future consideration for how we can leverage the development and nurturing of cognitive abilities, and avoid mitigating them through this practice of just trying to get quick information. Okay, thank you very much.